Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to extend a very warm welcome to each one of you at the nice global conclave from the laps of the beautiful Himalayas, where the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement is located. The think tank was established in the month of February in the year 2016. It undertakes independent research in the field of international relations, foreign policy, security studies, and development. NICE has four research centers: China Studies, Neighborhood Studies, Non-Traditional Security Studies, and Security and Strategic Studies. The institute focuses on 8 research topics: climate change and energy, global governance, sustainable development and smart cities, refugee and migration, China's Belt and Road Initiative, border and transboundary water politics, Indo-Pacific affairs, disaster management, and international economy and development. Previously, NICE has had the opportunity to host distinguished speakers from all around the globe.
It was a great pleasure inviting me to speak here at NICE.
It's a real pleasure to be able to speak with all of you.
Well, thank you anyway, and I certainly admire the work that you're doing.
I'm very happy to be with you all.
NICE Global Conclave is the flagship event of Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement. The theme of the 3-day conference is connecting Nepal to the world by bringing leaders, diplomats, business leaders, and scholars from all around the globe. The objective of the conclave is to introduce Nepal to the world and at the same time update the Nepalese policymakers and experts about the fast-changing geopolitics, which will help Nepal reshape its foreign policy to achieve its national goal. This is a session Q of the conference, and to chair and moderate this session, it's a real pleasure to have with us Professor Sharad K. Soni. Professor Sharad K. Soni is Chairperson at Center for Inner Asian Studies, School of International Studies, and Director at International Collaboration, JNU New Delhi. His research interests lie in Inner Asian, Eurasian study with a focus on issues concerning the geopolitics of the region, identity and migration, regional security, as well as history, culture and politics of Mongolia and China's Inner Mongolia. He has been visiting scholar, professor at University of Cambridge, UK, Peking University, Sichuan University, China, Eurasian National University, Kazakhstan, Mongolian Academy of Sciences, Mongolia, and Indiana University, USA. He is a book review editor for South Asia Asian Ethnicity Journal and editorial board member of several reputed journals. He has to his credit 6 books including Mongolia Today, Internal Changes and External Linkages, and over 100 articles, research papers, chapters published in journals and edited volumes. A recipient of Asia Fellows Award, he is also conferred with prestigious Nairamdal Medal by the President of Mongolia in 2015 for his contribution on Mongolian studies. Without any further ado, I request the chair to please take over.
Thank you so much. So we are all here. It's indeed my pleasure to chair this nice global conclave session on geopolitics of small and landlocked states. I would say the theme is very important today scenario, as it has been in the past, given that in geographic parlance, a landlocked country is one that does not have open access to the sea. Throughout the history, a landlocked or centrally located country was viewed as having an advantage, whereby several decades later, perhaps after a period of economic decline, it had been considered a disadvantage of being landlocked. In terms of economic definition of being landlocked is much more complex than the geographic explanation. One can argue that the economic development of a landlocked country is constrained by the presence of several factors like remoteness from major markets, poor infrastructure, and border causing difficulties, which imply high transportation costs. Landlocked countries therefore not only face the challenge of distance, but also the challenges that result from a dependence on passes through a sovereign transit country. Due to their landlockedness, these countries also depend on, I would say, strong political relations with transit countries or neighbors, direct neighbors. And if their transit neighbors are in conflict, either militarily or diplomatically, borders can easily be blocked by the varying transit neighbors. Even when there is no direct conflict, landlocked countries are extremely vulnerable to the political whims of their neighbors. So the landlocked countries are commonly seen as victims of geography. The situation becomes even grave when the landlocked countries fall within the categories of smaller states. Having said that, I would say, today, of the 49 landlocked countries in the world, including 5 partially recognized landlocked countries, several of them, like Central Asian countries of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, as well as Inner Asian or Northeast Asian landlocked state of Mongolia, South Asian landlocked states of Afghanistan, Bhutan, Nepal, and many more in the world have chosen such policies that can offset the handicap of their location and improve connectivity with the rest of the world, and thus creating a new geopolitical dynamic within or beyond the region they belong to. Similar geopolitical dynamics can be witnessed in small states too. It doesn't matter whether they are landlocked or not. Having said that, it would be interesting to know today in this session how geopolitics of small and landlocked states are doing their bit to receive attention at regional and global level, despite the superiority of their neighbors in terms of economy, population size, and military strength. We have an excellent panel of experts in this session today, and I would request each of them to strictly follow the time limit so that we could have some time for Q&A and discussion. And the time limit will be 7 to 8 minutes maximum. Now, without wasting time, I would like to invite the first speaker of our panel, Dr. Stuti Bhatnagar, who is from University of New South Wales, Sydney, in Australia. Dr. Bhatnagar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Soni, and for inviting me for this today, and to all the other panelists, which looks like a great topic, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Now, just to kind of introduce this talk, this presentation is actually based on a joint paper that I wrote with Dr. Ahmed, who is the next speaker. And what essentially we were trying to do was to consider the particular dynamics of landlocked states in South Asia and to look at their relationship with their coastal neighbors. And essentially we were trying to look beyond territorial conflicts or purely economic aspects of the relationship, or the internal dynamics of language and ethnic identity. That is also the focus of South Asian borderland studies. So we've tried to expand some of these arguments to look at foreign policy interactions between Nepal and India, and Afghanistan and Pakistan. And our basic argument is that it is a combination of state-making history, colonial afterlives of British frontier policy, and the ongoing struggles of Afghanistan and Nepal owing to their landlocked status that has had a cumulative effect on their relationship with their coastal neighbors. So the paper focuses on 2 distinct case studies. The first is India's relationship with landlocked Nepal, and the other is Pakistan's relationship with Afghanistan. So I will be talking about the India-Nepal relationship, and Dr. Ahmed after me will touch upon the Pakistan-Afghanistan case study. So in general, and as Professor Soni has also very kindly given us a backdrop here, landlocked states have certain basic impediments. These states are historically dependent on their coastal neighbors for transit facilities that also impacts their economic development. They have to pay high transportation costs to access the ocean. They have to pay higher trade costs. There are costs for building and infrastructure and higher prices on imports. And in some cases, they also have to pay part of the export revenue as rent to their coastal neighbors. Additionally, the nature of interaction between landlocked states in South Asia also reflects an asymmetric political relationship. The dependence on coastal neighbors means that landlocked states are not easily able to diversify their trade partners. They also face economic blockades from their coastal neighbors, which can be seen both in the India-Nepal example as well as the Afghanistan-Pakistan case. In addition, they depend a lot on infrastructure and other administrative kind of practices from their coastal neighbors. And of course, like Professor Soni mentioned, political relationship and peace and stability between the coastal neighbors is also a big factor. Now, this asymmetry in South Asia is driven to a big part by the pre-colonial arrangements and the continuation of these dynamics since the end of colonization. And the power asymmetry is particularly visible in the case of Nepal's relationship with India and Pakistan's with Afghanistan. And both India and Pakistan as coastal neighbors have incurred material as well as non-material costs on their landlocked neighbors, and something that we will highlight further. Now, in addition to traditional relationships, what has happened is geopolitical transformations and the constant need to find new partners for trade has also made Nepal and Afghanistan very resilient. And they're constantly looking to reduce their overdependence on their coastal neighbors, looking for new partners for trade and development. So in the case of Nepal, it's China. In the case of Afghanistan, it is India that is trying to fill that gap. And this has created a whole bunch of new problems here. So I'll just move on very quickly. But before discussing the India-Nepal case study, I think it is also important to mention the impact of colonialism in this region. So as a part of its Himalayan frontier policy, the British controlled the defense and foreign policies of these states and used them to access markets in Tibet and China. And even though these states have followed different political paths since independence, the impact of their geography and their relationship with coastal neighbors have continued. So for example, Nepal has inherited an open border policy with India that enables Nepalese nationals to travel and work in India. Similarly, Pakistan has inherited colonial border disputes, leading to a complex relationship. So moving very quickly to the India-Nepal relationship then. So like I said, historically, the colonial history is important here. So Nepal represents essentially a second frontier for India, and it is crucial. It was crucial to protecting India from military expeditions and the influence of China. And the Treaty of Sugoi is essentially established formal borders between British India and Nepal that were redefined when Nepal was recognized in 1923. Now, in the post-colonial period, it is the India-Nepal Treaty of Peace and Friendship, which was signed in 1950, which provides a very broad framework for this special relationship, in addition to a trade partnership. So it allows for the import of arms and ammunition. It gives special privileges to be enjoyed by nationals of both countries to live in each other's country, where they can have ownership of property, participate in trade and commerce and movement. And the open border arrangement has created various flows of migration. So they are ranging from daily domestic need workers to seasonal migration or long-term migration of skilled and unskilled workers, in addition to educational exchanges and so on. Now, the treaty allows for Indian access to Nepali imports and the free movement of people and goods, an aspect that is crucial to Nepal's status as a landlocked state. There were some apprehensions regarding the 1950 treaty, especially for Nepal, on tariff rates and the insistence that transit arrangements should be separated from trade, but there haven't been any changes in the treaty. The treaty was renewed in 1978, and there is a trade partnership between India and Nepal that extends to various aspects, including infrastructure development, building roads, dams, highways, and an overall trade relationship. Politically as well, the history is full of examples of Indian political involvement in Nepal's domestic politics, including right from 1951 to the reinstatement of King Tribhuvan, and again later with other rulers and governments in Nepal. In the 1950s and 60s, the attempts by King Mahendra to reduce Nepal's excessive dependence on India also included establishing diplomatic ties with China, and Nepal also asked India to withdraw its military mission from Kathmandu. There were also reports, disputes regarding plans for the Kathmandu-Lhasa highway and other strategic relationship with China, which disturbed India. And overall, Mahendra was critical of Indian support to the Nepali Congress, and it led to the Panchayati Raj system in Nepal. Now, for India, these developments were seen as a violation of the 1950 treaty, and the renewal of the new treaty was sort of delayed until 1978. Other things in the neighborhood were also impacting Nepal's policy here, including the annexation of Sikkim in 1975, as well as the creation of SAARC, which could have become a platform for a small landlocked state like Nepal to have a platform to voice its concerns. I think the 1980s was essentially very significant here as well, because again, Nepal was trying to reduce its dependence on India, it tried to introduce a system of work permits from Indian nationals. And there was a decision to import arms from China, which again, India saw as a violation of the treaty. And what India did was impose an economic blockade, which had significant ramifications for Nepalese economy. It also created political disturbances within Nepal. And essentially what it also did at a broader level was to expose Nepal's position as a landlocked state and its continuing dependence on India. And there were a whole bunch of instances in the 1990s as well. I will not go into that. Now, these kind of repetitive patterns of Nepal's political interaction with India have continued since the establishment of a federal republic in Nepal, as well as the new Indian government led by Narendra Modi. So after Modi's visit to Nepal in August 2014, even though the traditional economic, cultural ties were emphasized, and there was a new impetus towards trade, transit, and this whole business of connectivity projects, the troubles in the two relationships also began to be exposed. So when in 2015, when the Nepal's constitution was announced, Modi suggested that the interests of the minority Madhesi population in the Terai region must be protected, which led to a wide-scale protests and once again an Indian economic blockade. Now, and this blockade came in the same year as Nepal's devastating earthquake, and it created a lot of shortages on essential products in Nepal, including petroleum, medical supplies, and so on, and had great costs for Nepal's economy, once again highlighting its vulnerability as a landlocked state dependent on India.
Bhatnagar, could you please summarize?
Sure.
Your time is up, it's already crossed.
Sure, 1 minute.
Yes.
So what essentially now what Nepal is doing is trying to hedge between India and China. It's trying to reach out to China for some of the infrastructure projects and so on, which is obviously of concern to India. And that has created a whole new set of problems. Maybe we can talk about that in the question answer session. But what I would like to highlight is that Nepal has been resisting India's position as a coastal neighbor with its superior economy and has been trying over and over again to reduce its dependence. But the landlocked nature of Nepal and its geography has continued to restrict its policies. Thank you. I'll stop there. Professor Soni, you're still muted.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was going on and on. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Dr. Bhatnagar, for your excellent presentation. For a country like Nepal and its geopolitics, we would have more time during discussion. That is why I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but I had already given you 2 more minutes. Anyway, our second speaker on this panel is Dr. Zahid Shahab Ahmed. He is a research fellow at Alfred Deakin Institute for Citizenship and Globalization from Deakin University. Dr. Ahmed, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor. And as Dr. Bhatnagar talked about, this is from our joint paper, which was published in the Australian Journal of International Affairs. So as he has already taken 2 more minutes, I'll try and take 2 minutes less in terms of my presentation here, because I have less ground to cover, and I won't be talking about the theoretical framework and all of that. So in terms of Afghanistan, it has long been a part of geopolitical competition, and if anyone who's interested in the great game, history and all that, so when it was a buffer zone, the British India Empire had approached actually the Ottoman Empire to gain Afghanistan's support against the Russians. And most of those dynamics haven't changed much if we see, especially through the geopolitical dynamics of landlocked states, and in this case comparing Nepal and Afghanistan with reference to the influence of their coastal neighbors, we thought would be an interesting angle to look at in terms of the literature in South Asian studies. And the important question that basically we wanted to look at was that how the dynamics have since changed. For example, especially the creation of new states of India and Pakistan in 1947, how the geopolitical dynamics involving the landlocked states who used to act as buffer states have changed in any ways. And this is an important question that in our co-authored paper we unravel. And as the partition of the India-Pakistan or Indian subcontinent wasn't free from controversy, there emerged a dispute between Afghanistan and Pakistan over the Durand Line demarcation. And it's not just limited to a border demarcation issue, because it's linked to also Pakistan's concerns on Pashtun nationalism and Afghanistan's claim over Pashtunistan. I'll try to focus on how Afghanistan's geographical reality, being a landlocked country, has influenced its relations with its key coastal neighbor, in this case, Pakistan. And basically, I'll focus on the strategies used by the coastal neighbor to gain Afghanistan, for example, submission on many occasions or full support, and Afghanistan's resilience as well. So landlocked states, as the geopolitical dynamics change, they have also been exposed to opportunities that they are benefiting from time to time. In terms of political and cultural relations, Pakistan and Afghanistan have mostly faced conflictual relations. Other than the period when there was the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan under the Taliban, Pakistan has never really enjoyed friendly relations with Afghanistan. And before the 90s, for example, there were often diplomatic crossfires over the issues of border dispute and also the Pashtunistan issue. And this could be one of the reasons that Pakistan fully grabbed the opportunity to join the US supported Afghan jihad against the Soviets to gain more influence in Afghanistan. But again, as the geopolitical dynamics have shifted since 9/11, India has become a key player in Afghanistan, and it has very close relations with Kabul now. And this is Pakistan's one of the biggest worries for Pakistan and Afghanistan. Also, if you recall, in 2016, the SAARC summit was cancelled or postponed, and Afghanistan sided with India to oppose or to go against this summit being held in Islamabad. And since then, there has not been any summit, any SAARC summit. And during 2017 and 18, Pakistan also, started to show that it has upper hand in terms of its relations with Afghanistan, being the coastal neighbor. And Pakistan closed its border crossing with Afghanistan on 4 occasions during these 2 years, including closing the Torkham and Chaman border during February, March, and May 2017, and later in July and October. So these can be seen as attempts to gain Afghanistan's, you can say, submission or support, or at least a policy which is not against Pakistan. So, and Pakistan has often used this tool of closing its borders because Afghanistan has largely been, or historically has been, actually dependent on trade via Pakistan or Pakistan's Karachi port. But what has happened is that Pakistan, by doing that, has pushed Afghanistan further towards India, or India-led projects. For example, the Chabahar port. Afghanistan is very much a part of that. And with time now, India, through collaboration with India and also Iran, Afghanistan's #1 trading partner is now Iran and no longer Pakistan for the past 3-4 years. So the dynamics have changed, and these landlocked countries, especially the one like Afghanistan, they have more opportunities to show their resilience against the attitude of their coastal neighbor, in this case, Pakistan, of course. So for these reasons, the true potential of Afghanistan's trade with Afghanistan is also, it has been underutilized. And regular border closures are also a reflection of the strained trade relations between the two countries. And Pakistan has also started to put a fence along the border line, and on that also there are differences between the two sides. But again, focusing on the new geopolitical dynamics, as China's influence is growing in South Asia. So similar to the case of Nepal, here Afghanistan is also looking at this opportunity in the Belt and Road Initiative. To begin with, when China approached Afghanistan, their answer was no. They said Pakistan should first grant India access for transit for direct trade with Afghanistan. But then when Beijing sort of kept its dialogue with Kabul, the situation changed and their decision changed, and now they are part of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or you can say the Belt and Road Initiative. In terms of defense and security, the relationship is also not very cooperative, because since 9/11, India has been a key actor there. India's cooperation in terms of defense and security is far more advanced, and India, for example, trains Afghan forces as well. And Afghanistan has consistently denied Pakistan's proposal to also train Afghan troops. And again, we have to go back to the whole geopolitical dynamic and Afghanistan's, or especially Kabul's, key concerns in relation to how Pakistan has been supporting the Afghan Taliban, or especially their concerns in relation to Pakistan's intelligence agencies. And especially when it comes to the peace dialogues and Pakistan's ability to bring the Afghan Taliban to the dialogue table, there are also concerns from Afghanistan that Pakistan is basically pulling all the strings in this case and influencing all the decisions taken by the Afghan Taliban. I'll have a different point of view on that, but that's not the point here. The point here is that how deep their trust deficit is and how that also influences their relationship. And despite mounting trust deficit between Kabul and Islamabad, Pakistan's geopolitical calculations have played a significant role in this relationship. While concerned about India's growing influence, Pakistan's, of course, long-lasting desire has been to support pro-Pakistan government in Kabul. And if you look at all the options available for Pakistan, and the most viable one is to support the Afghan Taliban. And that's what they have been doing. And as a landlocked country, Afghanistan has tried to reduce its over-dependence on Pakistan in terms of, for example, trade, in terms of security, and so on. And they have done that to increase trade with Iran and increase economic also relations with other regional players like India, and a strategic relationship with India as well. And to pressurize Afghanistan, Pakistan has used this leverage as Afghanistan's second biggest trading partner and host to the largest Afghan refugee population as well, often to convince Kabul or to gain Afghanistan's support. Pakistan has raised its issue that it would repatriate all the Afghan refugees. And this is something Afghanistan cannot afford, and then they listen to Pakistan more seriously. And under the changed geopolitical circumstances, for India-Iran-Chabahar partnership,
Dr. Ahmed, try to conclude.
I'm just concluding, so this is my last sentence. India-Iran-Chabahar partnership, Pakistan's tactics have been counterproductive and have only pushed Afghanistan closer to India. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Due to time constraint, I'm a little bit, trying to be strict. So now I would like to invite Ms. Mari-Liis, who is a program manager at Estonian School of Diplomacy. She is going to speak on geopolitics of small states. Dr. Sulg.
Yes, thank you. I'm not the doctor yet, but I'm working on that. To start with, I would like to share my screen. I have prepared some slides, and I hope that. So, good morning. It's a morning here, also from Tallinn, Estonia, from Europe. And first of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the organizers for offering this opportunity to introduce the Baltic and Estonian foreign policy thinking to a bit of an untraditional audience for me. But nevertheless, in my presentation, in this very short presentation, I aim to open the respective thinking that is characteristic to the Baltic states and in particular to Estonia. If one takes a look of the political map of Europe, then it might seem that the Baltic states and Estonia have nothing in common with the problematics of the landlocked states. But in this presentation, I aim to show you that how and why, in spite of being open to the sea, we very often feel being politically landlocked in the Baltic states. So I have divided my short presentation into three main dimensions. First of all, I would like to analyze that what is the connection between the small states and the geopolitics, while the latter mainly resembles with the politics of the large states. Then what are the guiding principles that have brought the Baltic states to where we are today? And last and definitely not for the least, what are the current geopolitical challenges of the Baltic states? To start with the connection between the two concepts, I would bring out that both the small states and geopolitics are contested and loaded concepts. That means that the understanding of them and even more the application of these concepts in foreign policy always contains some kind of meaning that is usually understood in a wider historical and political context and should never be taken out of context in its application. And when we usually think of the geopolitics, then we most often think of great powers and their foreign policy interests of the global actors usually. And that makes one to ask that what does this leave for the small states, and do they even have geopolitical agenda, and does it even matter? Well, to reply to that question, I would bring out that the small state agency is neither a new or a unique thing. We all know the Millian dialogue from where the small state idealism and realism confront. And from my perspective, I would conceptualize the growing geopolitical importance together with the proliferation of small states into the following waves that you can see on this slide. The first one took place during the First World War and was mainly an idealism driven. The second wave is based on the birth of multilateralism and international law, and is called the post-Second World War world order. And this is important for the small states because that gave us a voice in consensus-based decisions and a seat at the table. And the third post-Cold War wave has meant more diverse developments for the small states where there was no confrontation between the East and the West. And I would say that this is the period where the small states have had to find their own way. Geopolitics as a concept needs probably less introduction, but I think it's worth to remind that its ingredients, the geography and politics, should not be analyzed in separate, because as separately they never fully reflect the conceptual meaning the concept of geopolitics aim to carry. Therefore, the focus should be put on the interplay or on the synergy between the two. And what kind of power does the geography give, and where does that synergy locate a certain state in regional dynamics? Well, to follow this line of thought, I would argue that the great powers are the creators of the geopolitical space and the small states are the followers. Nevertheless, I would argue that the small states do not only follow the great powers created geopolitical space, but they also apply the geopolitical tools they can. And that is why we can discuss the small state agency today, because I would say it matters. Moving on to the second pillar of my presentation, I would move on to the Baltic states. And as you can see from this political map, first and most importantly, all the Baltic three, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, have transformed from post-Soviet to most integrated states in Europe in less than 15 years. And after regaining the independence in 1991, we became members of the EU and NATO in 2004. And I think it's important to note that after the successful EU and NATO accession, all the Baltic three have not chosen for free riding in these alliances, but aimed for becoming core members of both the NATO and EU. And that has meant adopting the 2% NATO defense spending criteria and becoming members of the Eurozone. Further, I would briefly introduce some of the guiding principles of Estonian foreign policy that should show how we have managed to compensate our political smallness. First of all, our foreign policy is mostly determined by history. That means that after being illegally incorporated into the Soviet Union twice in 1940 and in 1944, then after regaining the independence, we have prioritized multilateralism-based foreign policy more than during our first independence. And I would say that that has resulted in a mentality and goal that says never alone again. For the second, we exclude everything that aims to substitute NATO as a security guarantee. That means that we do not believe into the idea of European army or into the strategic autonomy of Europe. And that also means that we do not see ourselves as a bridge between East or the West, but only as a West. Because while being a bit of both, one eventually is part of neither, I would say. And that also means that we do not believe much into dialogue, but rather into deterrence. And that has brought me into the third point, that our foreign policy is a tool for us to guarantee our security and survival. That means that it is almost impossible to separate between our foreign and security policies, as one aims to serve another and vice versa. So on this slide, I have brought out some of the political moves that we have taken up since our re-independence, and that mainly could be summarized in becoming a global actor as much as possible. That has resulted in international peacekeeping. We have been participants in, I think, wherever possible. We've been in Iraq, in Afghanistan. Estonia is also currently in Mali together with the French forces. And also we have been, two of the Baltic states have been elected members of UN Security Council, which is a great and a big thing for us. And Estonia's membership is currently ongoing. And I would say that our strategy is that where we cannot determine or create the international politics or the international geopolitical space, then we can influence the agenda sometimes. And this is something that the UN Security Council has also given us an opportunity. And also Estonia as a small state is very known, I hope also for you, for its digital society and e-governance and cybersecurity capabilities. That has also made us more visible and known. So moving on to the last pillar of my presentation, what are the current challenges? I think that this slide is something that concludes very well our current and future challenges. As a response to the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the challenging European security architecture since then, the alliance, NATO, decided in 2016 Warsaw Summit to establish rotation-based multinational battalions to each Baltic states and to Poland. And here our current, our main challenge relies, first of all, how to keep the presence of these multinational battalions at the same time while the US and wider international community is growingly more focusing on the rise of China. And the third aspect is that you can see this narrow land strip between Lithuania and, it's here, Lithuania and Poland, called the Suwalki corridor, or a gap that is perhaps one of the weakest geographical links of NATO that would easily enable the adversary to cut off the Baltic states from the rest of the Europe, which is very crucial for the NATO forces to move in case of an armed attack. So therefore, our current main challenge remains in keeping the focus on our allies on the east. At the same time,
we will have to conclude now.
Yes, while we need to show solidarity with the containment on the rise of China. I will skip those, but what I also wanted to share with you is that also this COVID period has caused challenges for us. First, the wave showed how the borders were closed, and the second wave showed the same from the different geographical side. But however, we've been able to be part of the EU joint vaccine procurement. So to conclude, I think that we have been successful so far, but the challenge never ends. And as we say, our security is never complete. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So our last speaker of this panel today is Dr. Suman Acharya. He is Assistant Director at Nepal Rastra Bank. Dr. Suman Acharya, please go ahead with your presentation. Unmute your mic, please. Yeah. Dr. Acharya, please unmute your mic. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Soni. Distinguished chair, distinguished panelists and participants. Thank you all. Today's topic, geopolitics of small and landlocked countries, is very pertinent issues in contemporary time, and it will also be one of the important issues for the upcoming days as well. There is no doubt that there are 193 member countries of the United Nations. Out of them, 49 countries are landlocked countries. Among 49 countries, 5 countries are partially landlocked. Out of the 49 countries, there are 32 landlocked developing countries as well. Among the 32 landlocked developing countries, 17 countries are least developed countries. Another position is also necessary to make analysis. For example, if we analyze the bottom 12 countries of the Human Development Index, 9 countries are from the landlocked countries. They are least developed countries as well. It is the position, but we can also make a kind of the comparison between and among various continents. For example, in comparison to the landlocked countries of the Asia, Africa, or South America, the position of the landlocked countries of the Europe is better. It may be because of the regional integration and the common market. We can also learn from that point of view. Principally, there is the sovereign equality principle, which is applicable to all, but practically it may be affected by the different kinds of the situation. For example, there can be the military issues, or political issues, or cooperation issues, sometimes ideological issues, and many issues might be there. For example, Nepal is also a landlocked country. It is linked by the India and China to make a relationship with international society, especially in terms of the trade and related issues. Major countries are marginalized for the time being, but because aviation transportation system can be expensive, and marine transportation system can be easier and cheapest method. So if we have the access, it would be better. But for that purpose, you have to link through the land. Even train and other vehicle can also be utilized. And sometimes there can also be the issues. For example, indigenous types of the transportation method can also be applicable. In each and every place, there may not be the well-developed transportation system, and other transportation system can also be utilized by the landlocked countries. It is the situation because developmental status is not similar between and among the different landlocked countries. You can just look at the Switzerland. It is most developed landlocked countries, but many landlocked countries are not developed. They represent a good portion of the world territory, almost 11.4% of the world territory, and it also covers 7% of the world population. Sometimes it goes to 8% to 9% as well. So there is no exact data. However, it is the situation. So to resolve the problem of the landlocked countries, even there are many multilateral arrangement, even regional arrangement, sub-regional arrangement, and bilateral arrangement as well. United Nations, World Trade Organization are doing good work on that issue. Similarly, regional arrangements are also there in the context of the SARC. There is also free trade area agreement, and BIMSTEC also issued same types of the agreement. But these instruments are in the process of the implementation. In near future, it is expected that there will be zero custom duties provision for the trade-related issues. If so is the case, because it will be almost the shared market. In such situation, there can also be the issues of the economic integration, because SARC declaration frequently highlighted on the regional economic integration issues, because there are different stages of the regional economic integration, which are like preferential trade, free trade, custom union, then common market, economic union, monetary and fiscal union, and finally complete economic integration will be there. Preferential arrangement was there previously with the preferential trading arrangement in 1991. That was issued by the SARC, which has been replaced by the SARC in 2004. So we have entered in the second level of the economic integration. If there is the position of the common market or custom union first, then common market and other types of the economic integration process, there will be no problem. We can learn it from the European Union, because the position of the landlocked countries of the Europe is better because of same European Union and its instruments. There can be the free mobility, and transit issues not only related to trade and business. It may be the issues of the free mobility of the people as well as per the necessity, but there can be the security concern, which can be regulated by the transit countries and the world community as well. And sometimes there are always the issues of the treatment. For example, there are different types of the treatment, which are like national treatment, even preferential treatment, most favored nation treatment, special and differential treatment, and sometimes there can be the degrading treatment. Degrading treatment is not accepted by the world community in the contemporary time. We must use civilized thought in this world. So it would be better to apply special and differential treatment, and national treatment and preferential treatment are also better. Sometimes the application of the most favored nation clause may be adverse to the landlocked countries for those having complex geographical situation. Even it is not recommended to apply in such situation. Means any better method for the trade and transit can be provided, but ultimately it is not only the issues of the trade and transit, it will be the issues of the connectivity and connectivity in through via transportation, connectivity in the environment related issues, connectivity in the technological issues. Many issues might be there because technology and its application can reduce the adverse position of the landlocked countries, because previously it was not existed. Now we can sufficiently use technology, so that kinds of the technology can be the special situation to make equal trading system. In fact, landlocked countries may not make an equal trading system. It has been marginalized from the major trading system. In such situation, a kind of the facilities can be granted by the neighboring countries, other transit countries, and the kind of the cooperation should also be made by the world community. That is one of the important issues. So special and differential treatment is expected. For example, in relation with India, there is not a problem. Sometimes because of the political differences and other types of the differences, a kind of the problem is created time and again, but not always. There is a friendly relationship between Nepal and India. Culturally, they have the similar position. Even their Eastern philosophy has been jointly developed by the Nepal and India in the ancient history. That aspect cannot be forgotten, and it has also the good relation with China in contemporary position. Because of the geopolitical situation, it requires to make equidistance principle between India and China. It is one of the important issues. So sometimes it is highly expected to make cooperation to improve the situation of the transportation system of the landlocked countries, and if there are any types of the delays and difficulties, it should be resolved immediately. But in many aspects there is not a problem, but in some situation, especially in the
could you please conclude? We are running out of time.
Different situation created by the different types of the environment. It may be the challenges issues. United Nations highlights on the corridor approach of the transportation system and intra-regional connectivity. If we apply corridor approach of transportation, transport route will be reduced, so it will be easier for landlocked country. Another intra-regional connectivity can also increases the participation of the landlocked countries in the international trade. It is beneficial not only to landlocked country but also to the neighboring countries, transit countries, and other developed countries, because they can expand their market as well. So that is the position. Ultimately, cooperation and assistance are necessary. It will be based on the mutuality principle, because it is not only the issues of the bilateral or sub-regional or regional or global. It can be.
Please conclude. Please conclude.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so sorry interrupting you many times. I've already given you 12-minute time. Yeah. So we have left only 5 minutes to discussion. I have a few questions, but first, I would like to ask from Dr. Bhatnagar, as I received the questions in the chat box. There is mutual and cordial relations between India and Nepal regarding religions, human rights, democracy, freedom, etc. But how to make the cordial relations between the two countries regarding the business and economic development, border issues, access to sea and resources, utilization of both countries for the mutual economic benefit and development to minimize the trade loss of Nepal around $12 billion with India. Who is more responsible for that? I think India would be more flexible for the issue because of the countries. This is the question. Yeah.
All right,
30
thank you for
seconds.
that.
30 seconds.
All right, I think it's a complicated dynamic and there are a lot of things that need to be considered here. So there are a lot of projects that are happening and there seem to be delays on both sides, from the Indian side as well as from the Nepali side, with regards to administrative and other kind of delays. And the politics of this dynamic is also important. So India is the more economically superior country here. It also has an advantage being the coastal neighbor. So I think India should do more, and there needs to be more emphasis on these projects, considering that it is such a historically important relationship. And there doesn't need to be any reason for a trade loss because we have an open border. And those kind of things, there has been enough time in the past to fix a lot of these issues. And I think there is an effort to do that now. A lot of it is driven by the pressure from China and Nepal's growing closeness to China, which has sort of kickstarted a lot of the delayed projects, which is a good sign for Nepal, because it should technically reap the benefits from both India and China economically.
Yeah, and there's also a question from Dr. Ahmed, and he suggested me to ask from you, since you both have worked together in some projects. So there's a question on how do you see the future of Afghanistan in terms of geopolitics being played there?
The future of Afghanistan, again, is a very, very volatile situation right now. It's very unclear which way it is going to go. But there are some things that have emerged. So India is no longer on the back burner. It is a very active part of the dynamics in Afghanistan, and it cannot be really. So earlier it was just Pakistan and the US in Afghanistan, but the number of actors operational in Afghanistan has increased. If Afghanistan joins the BRI, which it is likely to do, that leaves India is probably then the only South Asian country which is out of the Belt and Road Initiative, which should involve a lot of thinking in Indian foreign policy on what can be gained or lost from being excluded from such an arrangement, because all our regional partners are now have joined the BRI. And I think that is a reality in Afghanistan too.
Thank you, Dr. Bhatnagar. And one question from Ms. Sulg, on Estonia. I think I myself visited Estonia, Tallinn University twice, so I'm quite familiar with Estonia. We have just a very simple question. What kind of challenges Estonia is facing right now during the pandemic period?
Yes, thank you for that. I think the pandemics has been quite a moment of truth for us. As I briefly mentioned during my presentation, then during the first wave, we were shocked how, for example, Poland closed its land borders, and actually it was based on their domestic politics and some domestic issues to take control over the domestic situation and the spread of COVID. And even the transition traveling was forbidden for the Baltic states from Europe to return to home. So it was quite a shock for us, because many analytics put a security label on this policy. That meant that in case of whatever crisis, Poland could do this again. But we do share our security perspectives, and we share very good cooperation in terms of having NATO troops on the ground and so on. But Estonia solved this crisis so that we sent our own Estonian Tallink ship to collect Estonians and other Baltic citizens from Germany, and they were taken through the sea. So it was a big thing for us, not being landlocked at that time. So we were able to return our citizens through via sea connection. But the second wave, the current wave that is more or less ending now, showed us that we are not that close to Finland, actually, as we love to think, because they were not keen to open the sea connection between Estonia and Finland, and that was a big problem for us, because there are a high number of Estonians who work in Finland as construction workers, and they travel weekly basis between Estonia and Finland, and as they were not opening the free movement of people, it was a great concern us, because people had to choose whether they stay in Estonia.
We are running out of time. Next session is going to start. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry, we don't have much time. Otherwise, we would have discussed. Even I'm not going to speak about my concluding remarks, So what I would say, excellent presentation indeed. All our panelists who have done thought-provoking presentation also. Maybe bilaterally we can discuss a lot of things about this. And I thank all the panelists as well as our participants. I also express my sincere thanks to NICE for giving me opportunity to chair this session. Thank you very much. Thank you once again to all the participants as well as my panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Distinguished Chair, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, as we have come to the end of this session, we would like to express our sincere gratitude and thanks to the Chair for agreeing to chair and moderate the session today. Our sincere thanks also goes to all the speakers for being a part of the event and delivering such comprehensive and convincing presentations. We would like to acknowledge our gratitude to our friends from the diplomatic community, experts, academia, media, and different organizations. Finally, we must also mention our deep sense of appreciation for the audience who participated in the webinar and those who are watching us live. Thank you for your valuable time and attention and for making this session productive with your questions. Once again, we are truly honored to have you all with us today. Please do join us in the next